Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Line Change, a shortened week as we come out of the holiday break and get ready for Wednesday's 14 game slate in the NHL. We'll also talk about Thursday as well tomorrow. But for this one, it's just me and Nick. And for this one, we're going to start with our favorite underdogs for the upcoming Monster slate. We are aligned on one of them. We are not aligned on the second one. So let's start with the one that we are both digging here.
Yeah, I hate that we have to go right back to it, but I think the Senators are being given a pretty good number to be plus 150 versus Toronto. Um, they have really comparable results over the last month, which I know everyone's sick of hearing, but at the end of the day, it has just been for the Sens, the main thing's just been a complete failure to close out games. We almost saw that again versus Pittsburgh. But it ended up being a play that finally worked out, and I think that could be the kind of thing that team needed. They finally held on. They got one of these wins, and I continue to just look at this roster, think what everyone thought it should have been entering the year. They have been so disappointing, but they have kind of ran really to their worst possible record in terms of the way they've played. So, and I should note, especially in a game like this coming out of the break, it's not the worst thing, I don't think, to take on this Sens team versus the Leafs in this kind of a spot where I feel like you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. Like maybe as a general rule of thumb, I'd probably prefer to lean towards underdogs even more than usual on this slate. So I just think we're getting the number here. I still think the Sens have all the pieces that, everyone was proclaiming them making the playoffs because of what their roster is. So as much as it's been a disappointment, as much as we've personally taken some horrible losses on this team, I think they can follow up that Pittsburgh game. I think we're getting a big enough price here in a game where they're going to bring it. It's a huge spot for them. They have to be ready for this, even coming out of the break. And I just think they can play with this Leafs team. They have the offensive pieces to expose Toronto's back end a little bit. You never know what you're going to get out of Toronto's goaltending situation until Joseph Wall comes back. So there's just enough arguments against Toronto here and enough volatility, I think, in this game where this is a good price to get on the Sens.
Yeah, I think when these two teams played a few weeks ago, we talked about liking the Sens a bit because of what you just said. They have the high end offensive ability to score with Toronto, expose that banged up blue line, and the goaltending, which is a concern for the Sens, is also a concern for Toronto. And in a weird way, the way that Ottawa won that game against Pittsburgh was almost the best possible outcome for us because we had this one. If we had this one circled a few days ago, because yeah, they did win, but they also blew lead. They had to get to overtime to do so. So there's still some buy low value or prove it to us value for Ottawa. So I do like the spot here. I think the number is good on the Senators.
Yeah,
And
and
where
I'll
we
throw out there.
Mhm.
I was just going to say the last note I'll throw out quick on that matchup a month ago. That was one of those ones that sucked us in for a few more Sens bets because they could have pummeled the Leafs in that game.
Yep.
It's only one matchup, doesn't mean that much, but it definitely did show they can skate with them. They ran really bad to lose that game, which has kind of been the story of their season. At some point, you got to talk about closing out games and the ability to win, and they just have not had it. But that also is part of the reason here why we're still seeing this kind of a number, I think, in a game where I think this can easily just be a coin flip. Like, I think the gameplay is going to be really close. I think the Sens can definitely generate an even amount of chances. So, particularly coming out of the break, yeah, I think the number's there.
The underdog we have a little bit of an argument to go over is I like Columbus at north of 2-1 against the New Jersey Devils. At the time of recording, we were doing this on Boxing Day, Tuesday afternoon. I see plus 215 out there. There's been some 220s. I think plus anything better than plus 200 against New Jersey is okay. Part of the argument here is something you touched on coming out of a break. You do tend to lean towards underdog in these weird schedule situations where everybody was off or if a team coming off a bye week, whatever those in any sport, you do tend to want to lean with underdogs, and when there's a lot more variance to unknown variants to sort through, to sift through. Um, but that's not the only reason. The other reason here is the Devils are as good as we think this team can be. They're not there yet, and the goaltending it makes them so unpalatable when they're laying this kind of wood. So unpalatable. And we know that Columbus has been scrappy. The efforts have been all right. I thought the game against the Leafs was okay. What wasn't great, but by no means was it something that was like left me a bad taste in my mouth. Is something that like would make me think twice about betting Columbus at this kind of number. So with the math being here that that New Jersey could just give up 4 goals on 18 or 20 shots, and just makes Columbus viable at this kind of number. So it's a bet against the Devils goaltending, which just has shown no signs of life still.
It's been
And
horrible.
something that I think we can still make money off going
Yeah.
against. And
No,
on the flip side, I think that when it does turn around, if they make some improvement, whatever ends up happening, it should continue to put some buy low value on the Devils going, in the future. If this thing does kind of tank a little bit and then they start to get saves, that'll be the time that we've been waiting for to buy on New Jersey.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I disagree on this pick at all. I actually just was gonna say I looked at the Devils because I just thought, what do we think of this team right now? We're looking at minus 270. Has their recent play warranted it? Have they been a letdown? They've been 9-4-1 since Heischer came back. So 9-5 for betting purposes. So there's 64% of their games they're winning. So depending on where you value Columbus, that's kind of how I arrived on this looking like a relatively fair number. So I think you're right. It definitely would still be Columbus or pass for me. I just feel like I'm kind of seeing people still talking like the Devils are maybe losing a little more games than they are. When I look at that kind of a sample without Heischer, and now you're talking about a home game versus Columbus, so you obviously have to move the needle a little more than that. But I still think this is the right idea. I think it's them or the Devils or nothing. This could get crazy too. I think the total of 7 still looks almost tempting. It just feels like one where it's like looks so easy to blow open, but I don't think I can play the over 7. That's just such a key number in hockey when you can't even win on a 4-3 scoreline. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad take at all. I just think it's an interesting talking point because it's like what have the Devils been recently? They're getting a ton of market respect, but their play since Heischer's come back kind of warrants it.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, it comes down to how you view Columbus. We've kind of been, I do think Columbus has looked okay. So yeah, I don't mind it at all here. I think it's very valid.
And just on those totals, like this one opened 6.5, but quickly went to 7. The Leafs sends there was a 7.5 out there. We'll see where it closes, but some pretty high totals on the slate. I think they're everything is I think there's 1-6 and everything else is 6.5 or 7 as we record. So just keep that in mind as well. Okay, onto the big board. Like I said, pretty busy night here in the NHL on the 27th. Let's start with the Bruins and Sabres. Boston minus 160 on the road. Buffalo plus 132. A total here of 6.5. You were talking about the Devils a little bit and how it feels like they're like the general consensus is that they're losing a lot more than they actually are. I feel the same way about the Bruins and a little bit like the same way about the Avalanche as well. Like you just kind of look up and they're like still at the top and whatever.
But
One thing I will say,
the
I was gonna
Bruins
say the
are
one thing I'll
losing.
say the Bruins are doing are. I should have said that was like when I left the Islander game the Friday before the break. The Bruins ended up winning in overtime, or whatever it was a couple weeks before, and that was my thought. And now we're starting to see this Bruins team get dragged to overtime, to throw up a dud every now and then. I think the schedule's been a little rough, and the injuries are still an issue. I thought we were going to get a better number on Buffalo here, is what my point.
Yeah, I still more or less, and that's going to agree with what I say here. I wrote an article on the Wild to beat the Bruins in that game, the last game before the break. I almost was surprised at some of the numbers for Boston. Like So they're 5-5-3 entering that game. So now they're 5-6-3 in those 14 games. Their expected goals is well below 50%, and their goal differential would now be minus 12. They lost that game by 2, right? So it's been pretty bad. And we started to kind of question it. Like, I know part of that sample hasn't had Zaka, part of it didn't have McAvoy, so you got to factor that in. But we started to question when their record was as insanely good as it was, and they'd beaten up on a really bad schedule, if they weren't as outright far and above everyone else and like a clear top team as that suggested. And they really have come down to earth since then. So I'm actually a little afraid of Boston right now. I don't know if they're as bad as they've shown the last little bit, but it kind of feels like they are in a little bit of a lull, and they're kind of coming back down to earth with the pack. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to bet Buffalo. There is seemingly some credit being given to the idea of kind of how weak Boston really has been recently. So yeah, I do think it's kind of interesting though. I wonder, like, it's going to be really exciting to see how the Bruins look in the next 2-3 weeks, if they push back or they kind of continue to look more mediocre. Because like at the start of the year, no one thought this team was going to be as good as last year anyways. And they went on this surprisingly insane run, and then feels like everyone kind of just locked that into their minds. And now it looks like maybe that's not correct.
And yeah, on the Sabres, like I'm just looking for bigger numbers generally when I want to play them than this. And just look at their past 5 games. They had that great effort against Vegas, then they get shut out by Arizona. They come back home after that one. They lose 9-4 to the Blue Jackets. Then they beat the Leafs 9-3. Then they put up a pretty good effort against the Rangers and lose in overtime. Like, screams a team that you really just want to circle after they get past like the plus 160 threshold. And they're not there obviously here. And like you said, the Bruins, it does seem like the market is a little sour on them. So maybe not the right time to go against them. All right, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins and New York Islanders in UBS Arena on Long Island on Wednesday night. I will not be there for this one. My brother will be, though. Total 6.5. Islanders at minus 125. Penguins slight underdog plus 105. It looks right to me. This is not the time I would say you want to bet the Islanders. They're getting results the only way that they possibly can with the way that their roster is right now, missing 3 top 6 defensemen and embedding in new members on the blue line and getting key saves and clinical goal scoring from their top 2 lines have been really good. That said, you just look at the rosters and it's pretty close to even. You can see the advantages for both sides. You see arguments for both sides here. So nothing I'd want to play. It kind of feels, to me, this one actually feels like a good live betting game. I think a lot of times people oversimplify live betting in the NHL, which is as soon as the team goes down 2-0, I want to bet on the other team. This one feels like a game where you can actually do that and maybe get away with it.
Yeah, I could see that. If maybe someone comes out a little sluggish, you can't trust the Pens to defend a lead too much either. And I agree, really. I thought the number looked really fair, didn't jump out at all. I think kind of an easy summary of it would probably be that the Pens are a hair better than their record suggests, and the Isles are a hair worse than their record suggests. So for a game in New York, to me, that the price looked right.
Red Wings and Wild up next. Detroit plus 126, Minnesota minus 152, total of 6.5. Red Wings are weird too, man. This is both these teams are, I think, a little funky right now to bet on, because the Wild they're climbing. They are 7-3 in the last 10, 3 in a row. Had a great win against the Bruins, a couple good performances against good teams. The Red Wings started to really trend down heading into the Christmas break. They do get a win right before it against Philadelphia in overtime, which was, holy moly, what a weird game that ended up being. And then they lose on the second half of the back-to-back the next night. And it's so strange to say this, but what is working for the Red Wings right now is Patrick Kane. Like, Patrick Kane is actually playing really well.
The plan wasn't for him to carry such a load.
Right. And that's the other, that's so then that's what I was saying. It's so weird. Like, What's working for them is Patrick Kane, the player, but what's not working for them is Patrick Kane, like, being the player, like being the guy
Yeah.
that they need to take this team. And now the goaltending is in absolute disarray because Lyons hurt, Husso's hurt. You got a tandem of James Reimer and Michael Hutchinson. This is not the time to bet Detroit at this kind of number either. So uh, there are some passes where you're just like, pass, I got nothing to say on this game. I think this is a game that's really interesting that ultimately does lead to me just not wanting to touch it.
Yeah, I think so too. There's some question marks with Detroit. We had been heavy on kind of fading them when they were so hot to the point where I was getting Detroit fans upset. And for Kane, it has been coming in at the worst possible time. And as people who didn't think he was going to be very good, I'll defend him because he's been fine. And he just came in when this team was on the wrong end of everything, obviously, with Larkin being out, the Perron suspension, Comfer being out, the schedule, the fact that they were due to give up more goals and quit finishing at the same kind of rate we saw. They were about as pure a regression candidate as I think there was in the league. And now all those things have fallen apart, and everyone's like, they're 1-8 with Kane in the lineup or whatever it is, and he's just wearing it. So I don't think that's necessarily been him. I mean, it probably shows the point that you don't want him having such a huge role at 5-on-5, but he's actually done better than I think a lot of people might have expected. So yeah, I think they're an interesting team to watch moving forward. Like, are they a little closer to that team we saw early on now that they've got their bodies back? And then I think watching the Wild's injury situation here is kind of relevant too. I mean, they've been getting by playing Faber like 30 minutes a night, and he's been so good. But I feel like eventually it's going to be tough. And when Spurgeon's not in the lineup, I think they're going to need to get him back. So he's day to day. I think that's probably the main one to kind of watch here. But I didn't really have a lot of interest in either side. I feel like Detroit will stabilize some this month.
Yep. All right, on to your Caps. They are taking on the Rangers in Manhattan. They are a chunky underdog, plus 172. Rangers coming back at minus 215. Total here of 6. I think the only 6 on the board at the moment. I actually like Washington here. We've had this discussion a lot just in passing now. The Capitals are the team that that people think the Islanders are, or the Islanders were in like their heyday, which is just an absolute greater than the sum of their whole parts machine. Like, they are, everyone goes out there, they all play their role. They are not easy to skate through. They're physical. They like just wear you down. They from the second the puck drops to the second the final horn goes, like, this team just works. And we've talked about it a little bit here, but just that quality is so important to like recognize in a hockey team over the course of an 82 game season, because it just raises their floor so significantly when you know, okay, I am almost 100% sure of the effort level I'm going to get out of the Washington Capitals night in and night out. And that's where it's at. The defensive numbers, offensive numbers, like, they tell you a story of a mediocre team, but the team just is able to push themselves past them because of the hard work, the good goaltending, and they're bettable. Like, they're a bettable team at this number, I think.
I think so. I honestly thought I'd probably end up being closer to a bet on the Rangers, but I just can't believe how little respect the Caps are getting. They're 10th in points percentage in the league right now. I think they're incredibly lucky to be there, but they're being priced like a Buffalo here.
Right.
Like, what did Buffalo close at for their game in New York last
Same.
week?
It's basically the same price.
Yeah, like, that's
Yep.
pretty
180.
crazy.
Mhm.
The Caps have defended really well, and that's even being reflected in the analytics. They're 7th in expected goals against over the last month, which looks about right. I think they clearly are playing really good defensively. They're doing a really good job insulating their goaltenders and kind of giving up what they want to give up. There's no offensive punch though, and I do
Right.
think, like, this team's going to come down to earth. They're winning. They're taking a ton of games to overtime, and they're winning there. They're winning 1-goal games. They're getting incredible goaltending. Like, I do think they aren't as good as their record, but yeah, I still think in this spot talking, like all those arguments about the way they've played and the successes they've had work in their favor at this kind of a price, when you're
Yep.
saying that if they're keeping the game competitive, that if they're hanging around, they're not giving up easy goals, this is the kind of number you want to take. So I do think it's the Caps or pass, and that's coming from someone who really thinks the Caps are not as good as their record at all. But again, they're being priced like a pure non-playoff bottom feeder here. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think the Caps are the team to consider in this game.
I think as a community, betting community, and people who are into like projections and making models and such, a lot of times we overlook some important context, which is this is the only way Washington can win. Like they if they went out there and thought, okay, we're going to run and gun with the the Leafs or the Avalanche or whoever, they get their doors blown off most nights. Like this is how you got to win with this roster, and it's working. And I think that teams generally don't get enough credit for doing that because
And
like
defending's interesting. Like it can be tough to quantify to an extent. Like pressured shots versus non-pressured shots is a gigantic difference. If you pay
yep,
attention to NHL players, when they're shooting and they have enough time, they don't have a stick in their vicinity, they don't have a lane, they're trying to pull the shot through. You can see how much different it is. Like fourth line grinders are going to pick their spots perfectly, and that becomes a huge part of it. Is like you're trying to quantify what kind of chances they're actually giving up. I think the Caps have probably defended better than a lot of people realize, but I don't really see what they're doing well on the offensive side of
right,
things. And I mean, that's showing. They're not scoring many goals. They're just winning close games. But yeah, it'll be
yeah.
interesting to see how this recipe works down the stretch. Um,
And it should
that's
be
the thing.
noted like the
They're going to play close games even when they play bad teams. I have no faith in them blowing out a Columbus. Like them going to overtime and winning with Columbus last week was just about as standard as it gets for them. So yeah.
yeah, and the Rangers
But
aren't
you know what? I'll also slide in there too because I get asked it by people who are, less into handicapping than us, by my friends who don't pay as much attention. Like, what's wrong with Ovi? Should we start betting him to score goals as he do? And I continue to say no because he keeps getting priced because of who he is. So yeah, like he'll probably start scoring more, but you can't bet him like he's one of the best goal scorers ever. He's like still like plus 170 or less.
yep.
Um, which I just don't think you can do. He's got 6 goals.
And I also think that this matchup too isn't terrible for them. The special teams difference is obviously
Yeah, and I mean that
horrifying.
might be an angle worth touching on quick too. Is that I couldn't believe how bad the Rangers played in Washington earlier. I think it was in December when in that 4-0 game. That was
Yep.
a complete no-show. It makes me think of the Toronto um, 2 games they had with the Rangers where the first leg the Rangers just completely no-showed and then they showed better the next one. So maybe there's a little bit of element to that if you want to factor in like that loss was definitely horrific for Labby. I'm sure he was
Right.
very upset about that and embarrassed. So, if you rate that kind of thing, maybe there's a little stock to be put into that.
Stars and Blues up next. Dallas is a minus 164 road favorite. St. Louis plus 136. Total 6.5. You like the over? I'm happy to pass on this one.
Yeah, I would say over or pass. I just look at this Stars team right now. They're deep. They can roll you with 3 lines. They've got that Duchesne units clicking so well. So they've got a lot of depth scoring. And I just continue to think that's going to show up versus the Blues. Part of the problem has been Binnington coming down to earth. And I just think this is kind of what the Blues are now, even though their offense is a little thin. They've got the Stars humming and coming out of the break too. I'm sure you'll probably see some things out there breaking down how in a small sample games have risen recently coming in and out of this break. So I don't mind it at all. I think that the Blues are still kind of a good bet in these spots to the over.
Okay, on to our beloved Coyotes as a home dog against the Colorado Avalanche. Avs are minus 166. Coyotes plus 138. Total of 6.5. Uh, just not there. It's just not there, unfortunately. happy to root for the Coyotes in this one. I feel like I've been betting against them too much, so um, we'll see where this number goes. I feel like the Avs have been taking money quite a bit as people are expecting, especially when they're healthy. Things to just click into gear. Some sports books have them as the co-Stanley Cup favorite with a team like the Rangers or Bruins. They did win their last 2 games going into the break. That said, it's against a team like Arizona, who is just going to make things kind of tricky with a good effort and um, a, a team that can score with Colorado on the right night. So it's a little tricky here. This handicap.
Yeah, I thought this looked pretty fair. I was kind of kicking ourselves for not betting the Avs in that Yotes game on Saturday. It felt like one of those ones that once the puck dropped and it was 4-0 Avs, I was like, yeah, that was coming. Because the Yotes really just aren't defending that well anymore, is the reality of it. Their goalies are being asked to do quite a bit. So I don't know. I agree, though. I think it's just a good spot. Cheer on the Yotes. Call it what it is. And I think about the Avs being the outright favorite, and it seems so insane to me because I think about some of the holes down the lineup, but also their top pieces are just better than everyone else's, and they're probably only still as flawed as any other team you want to really pick apart in the NHL. So I guess I see it. It seems kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think we'll start talking more like down the stretch futures in the coming weeks. But one I would say is like there will come a time I think to bet the Avs, and it's going to be right. It's going to be before they make the move that they're bound to make at some point. Like if you do believe that this team is a good bet at the Stanley Cup, I would do it um, pre-deadline because I think that when this team does uh, make a splash in the trade market, the market will react really quickly to Colorado's. It seems to react to a lot of stuff with them very quick. Jets and Hawks, Winnipeg, as you'd expect, traveling as a chunky favorite, minus 220. Chicago plus 180 at home, a total 6.5. For this one, nope, nothing for me.
Yeah, I had nothing here.
Yeah, it's I think the if you had to pick the game on this 14 game slate that I would want to bet the least, it'd be this one. I do like the Kraken though as a plus 125 underdog in Calgary. The Flames minus 150, a total of 6.5. For this one, it's pretty simple here. Like the Flames are just not attractive to me when they get to this kind of price, even at home, and against a team like Seattle that's struggled to find its footing at all this season. The Kraken did start to, if you want to call it stabilize, go right ahead. But they found a way to win a couple games going into the break.
4-0-2.
They're starting to maybe put some points in their pocket. And Calgary's just they're not going to run away from anyone. So why not take a shot with the dog here? Was my logic. I haven't bet on the Kraken in quite a bit. I feel like so. Here we go.
Love it. Yeah, I don't think the Kraken were ever as bad as their record, and they're starting to stabilize. But it's funny, you look at these two teams, one apart in the standings, and it does just feel like a destined to be a competitive, close game when you look at just everything that's gone on with these teams and the way they always show out. Yeah, I don't mind it at all with the Kraken.
All right, on the Kraken. San Jose, baby. Plus 270 in LA. The Kings minus 345. Total here a 6.5 as well. Man, it was fun for a bit with the Sharks. They now lost 5 in a row. The goal difference is sitting at a beautiful minus 67 through 34 games. Of course, those two huge losses are doing a lot of the heavy lifting there, but even without them, we're still talking about a team at like minus 50. Going up against a Los Angeles Kings team that is one of the best in the NHL. So, yeah, it's pretty tempting on San Jose, but I don't think I'll do it.
Yeah, I was passing on this one. Maybe you could say the Sharks are
catch
getting
them
to the low end
early.
of it again, I guess, given the schedule, but it feels pretty bad. Feels like a team that,
Yeah.
they got a little bit of energy there and they got a little dead cat balance and whatever it is. And probably just some better pet luck, really, because their underlying numbers were still right at
Yep.
the bottom. They were better than they were at their worst. But yeah, uh, I didn't really have anything too tempting here. And yeah, I don't know if you'd want to lay it to play the Kings here either at minus 360. Just seems about right. Seems like a natural game not to bet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like between the Caps and Blue Jackets, there are just a couple other big underdogs that I like better than teams like San Jose or Anaheim, who's hosting Vegas. The Knights minus 220, Ducks plus 180, total 6.5. Uh, not much here. The Vegas is like I don't think I'd ever want to bet Vegas at these kind of numbers with the way that they play and like just have the tendency to play into like grinded out tough game close games. Meanwhile, the Ducks, man, just not high enough even at home. So pass for me, Vegas and Anaheim.
Yeah, if I would play the over, if there's sixes out there left. There's a couple on the board right now, so I'll throw that out there. Ducks got some of their guys back. I think they can still put up some on the Knights, who seem a little unwilling right now to grind out games, and they give up a ton of goals on that tough Eastern swing. They've been playing a lot of high scoring hockey. I kind of think that's a little bit what they are right now. You talk about it all the time in the NHL. We've seen coaches say it. That you can't give it 100% every night. I think that specifically applies to the way that you need to defend when you're playing your hardest and doing all the little things to kind of the maximum of your ability. And then you look at the Knights goal scoring upside facing off against the Ducks. I think that this is kind of a solid over to target coming out of the break right now if there are sixes out there. But yeah, otherwise I would say pass.
Okay. On to our favorite bets for Wednesday, December 27th. A lot of games to choose from. We both like this one that you're on. So you can go first here.
Yeah, I thought this was a little surprising that the Panthers opened as a slight underdog in Tampa. I think it'll stabilize to pick them everywhere, and I would play it at minus 110 as well. Um, we look at this Panthers team right now, and I just think that this is a deeper team with a better back end, 1 through 6, and offensively they don't have Kucherov, but they got some big dogs pulling a ton of weight, and that's with Kachuk really on the low end of his offensive upside, clearly. And you look at the underlying results, it's not surprising to see that the last month the Panthers are drastically better almost everywhere. Across all strengths, they're second in expected goals. And I think they do show out pretty well on that front. Some of the recent losses weren't necessarily anything I think to look down upon. I was in the building for the Flames game. It was a bit of a weird game. It was really slow, a bit of a slog. But with that said, the Panthers probably still did enough that they could have easily won 3-1. Kind of the same story as the Kraken game. It feels like they're, if anything, just kind of having some issues finishing the last week or two. And I don't really think there's much else to get concerned with this Panthers team. I just think you can power rate them um, above Tampa all day long. I think that's fair to say. And, if you're someone who really worries about the home and road splits, um, I think that goes out the gate or out the window a little bit here. You talk about coming out of the break for a big rivalry game, and it's like, do they even fly to Tampa from Florida? Like, I don't know. I could personally not care less about that. I think it's kind of just a good time to get what I think is definitely a better Panthers team at an even price or as a slight underdog, hopefully for some people listening to this. Yeah, I just didn't quite see this one. I thought right now it definitely makes sense to make the Panthers a favorite over the Lightning.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And I do think that Florida's scuffling a bit in terms of their actual results is helping you out if you're looking at back. The Cats here, 5-5 in their last 10 for Florida, and Tampa's won 3 in a row. So it's just the situation couldn't have landed better for those looking to bet on Florida.
And
Panthers right now are a slight dog. We'll see where it closes, but like
and
you, I like them
Florida
in
should be
anything.
completely healthy.
Yep.
I'll throw out there too. Tampa won't have Sergachev, who's struggled badly this year, but I think they'd probably still rather have him in the lineup than not. So slight edge there with the roster situations as well.
For my favorite bet, I like Carolina as a favorite in Nashville. Carolina currently sitting as a minus 135, as minus 135 chalk. The Hurricanes they're doing so many things right, but the one thing that they're doing wrong is killing them, and they're just letting soft, cheap goals in. And for a team like them, that's such I mean, it's an issue for everybody, but for, let's say, like the Leafs or even the Devils to some extent, like those are teams that don't necessarily need to just work really, really hard to score. Carolina does. So like every goal that they allow that shouldn't go in just adds so much more pressure onto an offense that's calling card isn't finishing and creating a ton of high quality chances. The volume's always going to be there with Carolina, but the quality, of course, lags behind it. So I do think that at some point this Hurricanes goaltending situation just will shake out where they'll just get consistently slightly below average goaltending, and they can survive that. They can. What we saw from Kochekov was this past 4 or 5 game stretch was a perfect metaphor for where we're at with this team. Couple good games, and then an absolutely just a dud against the Islanders. The 3 of those goals had no business going in. So I'm going to continue to buy low on Carolina and just back that the goaltending turns itself around. They waived Antti Ranta. They sent him down. He's back up. I don't know who's going to start. Don't think it really matters. And the goaltending matchup against Saros is an absolute nightmare. But it just, even with that, the fact that Carolina is a minus 135 favorite on the road, even though they're completely missing expectations, still tells you that just how good this team is. It should be.
Yeah, they've been playing so well. It's definitely would be tough to be in that room on some of these nights, I think, because it's probably a bit of a question of what do you do. I'm sure it gets really frustrating, but they have been really good. I think you still want Kochekov. He really had been, and this is the crazy thing, stable for like 5 games, like you say. His numbers were amazing, but he didn't do anything. That Detroit game, he gave up 1 goal, and he probably should have given up 0. Probably 95% of NHL goalies would have had a shutout that night. And I think there's been a lot of that lately. They've just been defending so well. So yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a bad number at all, the way that like we can expect this to look. And even like Carolina's goal scoring upside, I still think doesn't look that bad when I look at the roster. Like I guess maybe compared to other like top Eastern teams, but with Svechnikov back in the mix, it shakes out pretty well. And like if Bunting can find his game a little bit, he's struggled. But like when you look at this roster, that's like 4 lines that are going to be irritating and could in theory chip in some offense. So yeah, I'm still high on the Canes. If they can get any goaltending at all, I think this is still the same team. If anything, they have more guys skating in their true primes this year if they can get the back end figured out a bit. So yeah, I like it. I think they're definitely a team to watch and haven't really downgraded them much. They just need a save, which is always a frustrating angle to just look at as a better. But
Yep.
yeah.
But that'll do it for this episode. 14 game extravaganza. We'll be back to preview Thursday nights. We won't get together for Friday, which means we also won't have a chance to give a true to form Winter Classic preview, but we'll touch on that when we record because the lines are already up and we'll know kind of where this market is going to head for Monday's Winter Classic as well. But until we meet again, for Nick Martin, I'm Michael Leboff. Thank you for listening to Line Change, and best of luck with all your bets on Wednesday night.